The secret letter in my father's desk. When I was growing up, I always thought my family was ordinary. My father worked long hours as an accountant, my mother stayed home to raise me and my younger sister, and our lives seemed perfectly routine. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. We had Sunday dinners, family movie nights, and yearly vacations to the same beach town. But as I got older, I realized something was off. My father was kind but distant, always hiding behind work or chores. My mother sometimes stared at him with this look I couldn't quite understand, something between love, anger, and fear. For years, I ignored it. Families are complicated, right? Everything changed the summer I turned 20. My father had gone out of town for a work conference, leaving his home office unlocked. I was looking for a spare phone charger when I stumbled across an old wooden desk drawer that I had never seen open before. It wasn't locked, but it stuck slightly, as if it hadn't been used in years. Inside, under some faded receipts and a stack of tax forms, I found a yellowed envelope. My father's name was written on it in my mother's handwriting. Curious, I opened it. The letter inside was dated 2 weeks before my sister was born. It wasn't a love letter. It was a confession. My mother had written, "If you keep this secret from them forever, you will destroy us. The truth will always find a way out. They deserve to know who you really are, and what you've done." I froze. What secret? Who you really are? I tucked the letter back quickly, but my mind was racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. What secret could be so big that my mother warned it would destroy us? The next day, I tried to ask my mom about it casually. "Hey, did you and Dad ever have any big fights when you were younger?" She looked at me strangely. "Why are you asking?" "No reason. Just curious." Her expression tightened. "Every marriage has arguments. That's normal." Then she changed the subject. I didn't push it, but my curiosity grew. Weeks later, my father returned from his trip, and life went on as usual. But I couldn't forget that letter. I began noticing little details I had ignored before. My father always refused to talk about his past before meeting my mother. He avoided family reunions with certain relatives. And once, when I accidentally mentioned something about family medical history at the doctor's office, he snapped at me, saying, "Don't ever assume you know everything about your family." It was bizarre. Then one night, while helping my mom clean the attic, I found a shoebox filled with old photographs. Most were harmless: vacations, baby pictures, Christmas mornings. But one photo caught my attention. It was my father, much younger, standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. They looked close. Too close. She had her hand on his chest, smiling like they were a couple. On the back, in faded ink, was written, "Me and D, 1998. The woman's initials weren't my mother's. My hands shook as I held the photo. Who was she? I didn't tell my mom what I found. Instead, I kept digging. Hook number 2, was my father hiding another family? Or something even darker? Over the next few months, I quietly searched for answers. I checked public records online. I looked through old yearbooks. I even tried to piece together timelines based on the photos and receipts in the attic. And then I found it. An old newspaper clipping from the late 90s. A woman had gone missing in our town. Her name was Sarah. She looked exactly like the woman in the photo with my dad. My blood ran cold. Was it possible my father had something to do with her disappearance? I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe they dated, maybe she moved away, maybe it was all coincidence. But the more I thought about it, the less I believed that. One night, I confronted my mother. I couldn't keep it in any longer. "Mom," I said, holding up the photo, "who is this woman?" Her face went pale. She sat down slowly, as if her legs couldn't hold her. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. "In the attic." She closed her eyes. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she said, "I told him this would happen. I told him the truth would come out." My chest tightened. "What truth?" She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Your father, before you were born, he wasn't the man you think he is." I pressed her for details, but she shook her head. "It's not my story to tell. He has to be the one." I was furious. How could she leave me hanging like that? For days, I avoided both of them, torn between anger and fear. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I went into my father's office, slammed the photo on his desk, and demanded, "Who is she? And what aren't you telling us?" He stared at the photo for a long time. Then he sighed. "I was hoping you'd never find out." This was the moment he decided to reveal everything. What he told me changed how I saw my entire family. He admitted that Sarah had been his fiancée before he met my mother. They were deeply in love, engaged to be married. But one night, she vanished. Police suspected foul play, but her body was never found. "Everyone thought I did it," my father said quietly. "I was the last one to see her alive. I swore I didn't hurt her, but nobody believed me." He explained that the stress nearly destroyed him. He lost his job, his friends, his reputation. But eventually, the case went cold. Years later, he met my mother and tried to start over. "But she never really went away," he said. "Not in here." He tapped his chest. I sat in silence, trying to process. On one hand, it explained the secrecy. On the other, it raised even darker questions. "Did you?" I asked quietly. "Did you hurt her?" His eyes filled with tears. "No. I loved her. I would never. But the truth is, I don't know what happened to her." That night, I couldn't sleep. Was he telling the truth? Or was my father capable of something terrible? I started digging deeper into Sarah's disappearance, reading every article, every forum post, every rumor. Some people swore my father was guilty. Others believed she ran away. A few even thought she was still alive, living under a new identity. The uncertainty ate at me. Then one day, out of nowhere, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Just a plain envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper with shaky handwriting. "He's not telling you everything. Look in the garden." What was buried in our garden? My heart pounded as I ran outside. My father's garden was his pride and joy, rows of roses, perfectly trimmed hedges, a small vegetable patch. I didn't know where to start. But something about the far corner caught my eye. The soil looked disturbed, not as even as the rest. That night, when my parents went to bed, I grabbed a flashlight and a shovel. My hands trembled as I dug. The earth was heavy, damp. Sweat dripped down my forehead. And then my shovel hit something solid. I froze. I scraped away the dirt until I uncovered a small metal box. Heart racing, I pulled it out and pried it open. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Old, faded, but still legible. They were from Sarah. The letters told a story I never expected. She wrote about being scared, about someone watching her, about threats she'd received. But here's the shocking part, she never accused my father. In fact, she wrote that he was the only one she trusted. One letter, dated days before she disappeared, read, "If something happens to me, it's not Daniel. Please believe that." My hands shook as I read them. If this was true, my father wasn't guilty, he was protecting himself from suspicion all these years. But why hide the letters? Why not show them to the police? The next morning, I confronted him with the box. His face went white. I buried them because no one would believe me, he said. They already decided I was guilty. If I showed them, they'd say I forged them. So I kept them. To protect myself. To protect your mother. To protect you. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The story doesn't have a neat ending. Sarah was never found. My father still insists he's innocent. My mother still avoids talking about it. And me? I'm left with a box of letters, a lifetime of questions, and the gnawing fear that maybe, just maybe, the truth is still buried deeper than I'm willing to dig. The brother I never knew existed. Growing up, I always thought I was an only child. My parents told me they had struggled to have children, and when I was born, they said I was their miracle baby. It was the story I had heard 100 times at birthdays and family gatherings. I believed it without question. But when I turned 22, I learned that everything I thought I knew about my family was a carefully constructed lie. It all started with a phone call. One quiet evening, I was studying in my room when my mother called out, "Sweetheart, can you get that?" I picked up the phone, expecting it to be a telemarketer or maybe one of her friends. Instead, a man's voice said, "Is this the Johnson residence?" "Yes," I replied cautiously. There was a pause. Then he said, I think I'm your brother. What do you do when a stranger tells you they're family?" I almost laughed. "You must have the wrong number." But he said my mother's full name. My father's name too. He knew where I lived, what city I was in, even the name of the street I grew up on. My hands went cold. "Who are you?" I whispered. "My name is Michael," he said. "I was adopted when I was a baby." "Your parents, they're my parents too." I hung up the phone. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might faint. Adopted? My parents never mentioned another child. Why would they hide something like that? I went downstairs, pale and shaking, and confronted my mother. "Who is Michael?" The look on her face told me everything. She dropped the dish she was holding, and it shattered across the kitchen floor. "Where did you hear that name?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He just called. He said he's my brother." Her knees buckled, and she sank into a chair. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother cry in a way that was raw, unguarded, broken. That was the night I learned my family was hiding another child. After what felt like hours, she finally spoke. You were never supposed to know." She told me the truth, or at least part of it. When my parents were much younger, before I was born, they had another child. My mother was only 19 at the time, my father 21. They weren't married yet, they were poor, and they made what she called the hardest decision of their lives. They gave the baby up for adoption. That baby was Michael. I was stunned. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She shook her head. "We thought it was better this way. Cleaner. You wouldn't understand." But I did understand. They had lied to me my whole life. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was filled with questions. Who was Michael really? What kind of life had he lived? Did he look like me? Was he angry at my parents? At me? I needed answers. So the next day, I called the number back. "Michael?" I said. He sounded relieved. "I wasn't sure you'd call." We agreed to meet at a cafe downtown. I was about to meet the brother I never knew existed. When I walked in, I spotted him instantly. He looked like me. Same eyes, same dark hair, even the same nervous smile. It was like staring into a slightly older version of myself. We sat down, awkward at first, neither of us knowing what to say. Finally, he broke the silence. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said. I needed to know where I came from." He told me about his life. He had been adopted by a kind couple who couldn't have children of their own. They treated him well, but he always felt something was missing. When his adoptive parents passed away, he decided to search for his birth family. That's how he found me. I listened in silence, my heart aching. He had lived a completely different life, parallel to mine, yet separate. When I told my parents I had met him, my father was furious. "You had no right," he shouted. "We made our decision years ago. It's in the past. Leave it there." But I couldn't. Michael was my brother, whether my parents liked it or not. The more I talked to Michael, the more I realized my parents' lies weren't over. Over the next few weeks, Michael and I grew closer. We talked on the phone every night, sharing stories, comparing our childhoods. He was funny, kind, and so much like me it was eerie. But then one evening, he said something that made my stomach drop. "When I got my adoption papers," he said, "I noticed something strange. The file said I was the second child your mother had. Not the first." I froze. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "It means, there might be another sibling. Older than both of us." I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Another sibling? Why had my parents hidden all of this? I confronted them again. "Is it true?" I demanded. "Do I have another brother or sister?" My parents sat in silence. My mother's hands trembled. My father refused to look at me. Finally, my mother whispered, "Yes." I felt sick. They admitted that years before Michael, before me, they had another baby. A girl. They were too young, too scared, and the baby was taken from them almost immediately. They never saw her again. So it wasn't just Michael. I had a sister too, somewhere out there in the world. What do you do when you discover your family tree has branches you never knew existed? Michael and I decided to search. We combed through adoption records, old hospital files, anything we could get our hands on. It wasn't easy, many documents were sealed, others destroyed. But after months of searching, we found a lead. Her name was Emily. She lived only 2 states away. I was terrified to reach out. What if she didn't want to meet us? What if she hated our parents? What if she hated us? But Michael pushed. "We have to try." So we did. When Emily agreed to meet, my heart nearly exploded. The first time the 3 of us sat together, it felt unreal. We were strangers, yet bound by blood. Emily looked nothing like me, but she had our mother's smile, our father's sharp eyes. She was cautious at first, but as the hours passed, we laughed, we cried, we shared stories. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. But when I told my parents, they refused to acknowledge her. "She's not part of this family," my father snapped. "What's done is done." That broke me. The truth is, my family will never be the same again. My parents still live in denial, clinging to their old lies. But I can't. I have a brother. I have a sister. And no matter what my parents say, they are my family too. The hardest part isn't that my parents lied. The hardest part is realizing they chose to erase pieces of their own children from their story. But I won't. Because family isn't just the people who raise you. It's the people you choose to love, even when the truth shatters everything you thought you knew.